Good morning. Good morning, everyone. I know it's so quiet in here. Today is Thursday, November 2nd, 2023. Prior to calling the meeting to order, I would like to ask any Transportation Committee members who are calling in by phone to identify themselves. No? Okay. As a reminder, if a member of this body is attending remotely, but is not at a location specified on the agenda, they may observe and comment as a member of the public, but may not participate in any member discussion or voting of this body. The meeting of the Transportation Committee is now called to order, and I have asked Mayor John Dutray from Montclair to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I just want to confirm quorum.
We show a quorum, Mr. Chair.
Very good, thank you. We are holding this meeting in compliance with Brown Act rules relating to telephonic video conference meetings. SCAG offices are open for members of the public to attend and participate in person. Instructions for providing public comment provided in advance and are also included in the agenda packet. Just a reminder to reduce background noise, please ensure that your microphone is muted when not in use. At this time, I will now open the public comment period of the meeting. This is the time for members of the public to offer comment for matters that are within SCAG's jurisdiction, but are not listed on the agenda. Staff, have we received any written public comments after the deadline of 5 p.m. on Wednesday, November 1st, 2023?
No comments have been received, Mr. Chair.
And do we have any members of the public who wish to speak at this time? Very good. Okay. So at this time, I'll now close the public comment period for matters not listed on the agenda. I would like to remind everyone to unmute your phone before speaking and state your name during deliberations and whether making a motion or offering a second. For those who have joined by phone, you simply press *6 to mute and unmute your phone. Okay. We now go ahead and go to the consent calendar.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, sir.
Might I suggest that we take item 7 first and then have a motion that includes 7 and the consent calendar? That way we can only do one vote.
Yes, I'm good with that. Okay, so first I just want to check if we have any members of the public who wish to speak on this item. I am not seeing any. So we are taking consent and the first item together, 7. Ed, do you want to comment on that?
If that's fine, then certainly.
Yeah, it'll certainly save us time in terms of having to do a second vote. Yeah, I'm good with that. Very good. Great.
So I'm not sure, Mr. Chair, who the staff person is that's presenting on item number 7.
I will tell you.
But there we go.
It's Warren Whitaker. All righty. Welcome, Mr. Whitaker. Hope we didn't catch you by surprise.
That's okay. Keep me on my toes. All right. Good morning, everybody. I am Warren Whitaker. I'm the manager of integrated planning and programming here at SCAG. The program guidelines presented for your consideration this morning are a new program established by the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, or IJA, the Carbon Reduction Program, or CRP, because we all love acronyms, provides funding for transportation projects that reduce carbon dioxide emissions from on-road transportation sources. You may recall that the TC and RC approved expedited project selection for fiscal year 2022 CRP funds last April. You may also recall that the selection in advance of, right, I just heard a beep, so excuse me if I get distracted. Beeps gonna throw me off. You may also recall that the selection in advance of adopted program guidelines was conditioned on concurrence from the Federal Highway Administration, or FHWA, on a framework for the selection of the CRP projects within the SCAG region. The FHWA approved framework is modeled after the federal apportionment process. Specifically, SCAG will use 65% of regional CRP funds for the solicitation of project nominations in partnership with the region's county transportation commissions. SCAG will direct 35% of regional CRP funds to identify, evaluate, and award funding for regional and/or local projects and partnership projects that achieve regional transportation goals and further the objectives of Connect SoCal. This morning's program guidelines are specific to the 65% share of the SCAG region's CRP dollars. Although the carbon reduction program was not specifically mentioned in the corrective action issued to SCAG as part of the most recent federal certification review by the Federal Highway Administration and the Federal Transit Administration, the same requirements apply for the carbon reduction program. These are highlighted in the first 3 bullets. Beyond compliance with federal requirements, Caltrans has developed a carbon reduction strategy that sets a framework for eligible priority project categories. These include the 3+1 pillars. So the first 3 pillars, transit and passenger rail, active transportation, zero emission vehicles and electric vehicle infrastructure, and the +1 is conversion of existing highway lanes to priced managed lanes. The project selection approach outlined here mirrors those approved by the TC and RC last June for the Surface Transportation Block Grant, or STBG, and Congestion Mitigation and Air Quality, or CMAQ programs. This slide distills key elements of the program guidelines. Consistent with the approved STBG and CMAQ program guidelines, the county transportation commissions will submit project nominations from their counties and classify the projects as highly recommended, recommended, contingency list, or not recommended. This is the same set of categories that SCAG will use for presenting the recommended projects to both TC and RC. Following TC and RC action on the program guidelines, SCAG will initiate a joint carbon reduction program, surface transportation block grant, and congestion mitigation and air quality solicitation for project nominations. This call is anticipated to open on January 4th, 2024, and close on March 29th. We will come back to TC in June and RC in July with recommendations on selected projects. Before I close, I want to acknowledge the collaborative effort that went into development, with both sets of program guidelines and the response to the corrective action issued to the region. We would not have been able to achieve this without the efforts of our County Transportation Commission staff, Caltrans, our federal partners, and other regional stakeholders that we continue to collaborate with. That concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Whitaker, and thank you to your team. I'll ask again if we have any members of the public who wish to speak on this item. I'm not seeing any. All right. So we'll go ahead and start with in-person speakers. Is there anyone in the room that wishes to speak on this item? Any questions or comments? I'm not seeing any. Virtually? Okay. So I will now we've already entertained comments. I'd like to ask for a motion for both consent as well as agenda item 7. I see a hand here, Ray Marquez.
Second.
Move. Second.
Do you have that? Very good. Alrighty.
Adele Andrade Stadler,
Yes. Yes.
Constantine Anthony, Catherine Barger, Elizabeth Becerra,
Yes. Yes.
Brian Bergson,
Yes. Yes.
Russell Betts,
Yes. Yes.
Daniel Brotman, Art Brown,
Aye.
Ross Chun, Denise Delgado, Andrew Doe, Jonathan Dumitru.
And I do, I'll say Ross too.
Wait, did you get Ross Chen as the yes?
Thank you. John
Thank you.
is noted as a yes.
Thank you.
John Dutre,
Yes.
James Gaisley, Jason Gibbs, Brian Goodell, Kurt Hagman, Jan Harnick,
Yes.
Laura Hernandez, Lauren Hughes Leslie.
Yes.
Thank you. Heather Hutt, Mike Judge,
Yes.
Fred Jung,
Fred Jung, yes.
Trish Kelly,
Yes.
Paul Krikorian, Linda Krupa,
Yes.
Bridget Lewis,
Yes.
Malcolm Lilienthal, Richard Loa, Clint Lowermore,
Aye.
Ken Mann,
Yes.
Steve Manos, Ray Marquez,
Yes.
Larry McCallan,
Yes.
Marcia McLean,
Yes.
Tim McOsker, Dennis Michael, Linda Molina,
Yes.
Carol Moore,
Aye.
Ara Najarian,
Yes.
Maria Nava Froelich,
Yes.
Frank Navarro,
Yes. Excuse me, yes.
Corona Nazarian,
Yes.
Gil Rebolar, Ed Reese,
Yes.
Celeste Rodriguez,
Yes.
Crystal Ruiz,
Yes.
Ali Saleh, Tim Sandoval,
Yes.
Suli Sorrow, Zach Schwenk,
Yes.
Marty Siminoff,
Yes.
Jeremy Smith, Ward Smith, Jose Luis Salache,
Yes.
Hilda Solis, Wes Speak,
Aye.
Karen Spiegel, Cynthia Sternquist,
Yes.
Steve Ty,
Yes.
Michael Vargas,
Yes.
Scott Voits, Donald Wagner, Colleen Wallace,
Yes.
Alan Wapner,
Yes.
Thomas Wong. Thank you, Mr. Chair. The motion passes 29 in favor and 0 against.
Gaisley, aye.
Thank you. Received for Gaisley.
You didn't call, excuse me, you didn't call Jeff Wood. I vote yes.
Oh, sorry, Jeff. Thank you.
We are good to go. Okay, at this time, we go ahead and turn to information items, starting with agenda item 8, smart freeways, an introduction to the next generation of freeway traffic management systems. I'd like to call up Annie Nam.
Good morning, Chair, members of the Transportation Committee. I'd like to just briefly introduce our next presenter. We are joined by Mr. Darren Henderson with the consulting firm of GHD, who will be presenting on our on the smart freeways concept, which introduces the next generation of freeway traffic management systems. As indicated in the staff report, this concept was initiated in Melbourne at the Victoria Department of Transport and Planning, and since then has been adapted by various US cities, including in the state of Colorado, Denver, Colorado, as well as closer to home here in the Southern California region with RCTC developing a pilot concept. And with that, Darren.
Thanks, Annie. So as Annie mentioned, we recently passed a critical milestone in our project with RCTC. So some of you may have heard about the concept of smart freeways, but I felt it would be a good opportunity this morning to share with you some of the background that Annie touched upon, what exactly we're talking about, and then a little bit of detail about the RCTC project and a couple of other projects that are happening around the country.
Good, I'll try.
There we go. Thank you, Warren. I do want to acknowledge some partners that we have in this process. The Colorado Department of Transportation, who you'll see in a moment, did the first pilot project here in the United States, along with partners from Australia, the Victorian State Department of Transport and Planning, Vic DTP, as well as Transmax. They've all been very forthcoming and willing to share their experience with these projects and allow me to do presentations like this to pass it along to their peers. So I just wanted to acknowledge their participation and involvement in these efforts. I'll start a little bit with what exactly are we talking about in the term with the term smart freeways. Managed freeways and smart freeways gets thrown around with a lot of different things. So this has a pretty specific connotation that's important to understand. It's really about implementing a new approach to how we control freeways. And it's not about just sort of managing the traffic flow. It's actually about trying to achieve full control of the traffic flow on the freeway. And we do that using a lot of familiar tools, things like ramp metering, lane use management systems, but we do it in a different way where we're really working with them as a comprehensive strategy, all of those systems working together to ultimately optimize the flow of traffic on the freeway. And if we can do that, we can get better productivity and performance out of our freeway facilities, get better use of the infrastructure that we have. And on a side note, in this age of SB 743, because it's primarily ITS, it is VMT neutral. So it is advantageous in terms of an option that we can use to move forward in trying to improve our freeway operations without actually increasing capacity. As Annie mentioned, this is a concept that was originally developed by the Victorian Department of Transport and Planning, effectively the state DOT for the state of Victoria and Australia. They've been on their journey for about 20 years now, and now have about 100 miles of smart freeways operating in the Melbourne metropolitan area. So a very extensive network of facilities. There are other projects that are now operational in Australia in the cities of Brisbane and Perth. So this is not a theoretical concept. This is an actual concept that exists on the ground and has proven itself as an effective strategy for managing freeway operations. What makes it different is the underlying intelligence that runs the system. It's a software product called Transmax Streams. And basically, that's a platform that allows us to integrate all of the ITS devices onto a common platform so that they're all working together. Often with DOTs, they'll have multiple different platforms running different aspects of their ITS. And that can often result in conflicts between devices and between systems. So by bringing them all together onto a common platform, we can get them to work seamlessly together and have more effective outcomes. Really critical to our ability to control the freeway operations is the concept of coordinated adaptive ramp metering. And I will use the term CARM moving forward, but that's basically what we're talking about. You'll see the term ramp metering and you may think, oh, well, we do ramp metering already. That's, how can this be different? It's really in the way that we do the ramp metering. We have a series of algorithms, not just one algorithm that drives the ramp metering system. And it's looking at balancing the optimization of traffic flows on the freeway mainline itself. So trying to identify as bottlenecks are being formed so that we can manage the traffic flow into those bottlenecks and prevent them from actually breaking down the freeway mainline, but also balancing the need to manage the volumes on the ramps. We obviously, with ramp metering, don't want to have a situation where we back the ramps up onto the arterial streets. So this system does a very robust job of monitoring how the ramps are working in terms of the vehicle storage and the delay that is being experienced by the drivers to ensure that we can balance those queues along an entire corridor, and by doing so, prevent that backup from occurring. In the projects in Melbourne, we've been able to demonstrate about a 25% reduction in their, or actually a 25% improvement in their traffic throughput. What that means is if you've got a 4-lane freeway, that's effectively adding another lane of capacity without adding another lane of capacity. So it's a very cost-effective solution to improving your traffic flows and the efficiency of your corridors. By doing that, of course, there's also a lot of follow-on benefits in terms of improvements in safety, in terms of improvements in the economics in the region, because we're reducing the delay that those vehicles are experiencing. So overall, it's been proven to be a very successful strategy in terms of managing freeway operations. So I touched briefly in my introduction about the Smart 25 project in Denver, Colorado. This was the first project that was completed here in the United States to prove that this is not just a one-trick pony for Australia, that it can actually work in application with the US Department of Transportation. So for CDOT, we did a 9-month pilot project, basically replicating the VIC DTP approach for smart freeways, focused on the coordinated adaptive ramp metering component. So that was the only thing that we implemented in Denver's case. There's no lane use management systems or any other ITS associated with it. It's really focused just on that coordinated adaptive ramp metering, which truthfully is the heavy lifter when it comes to managing your freeway flows. And it, of course, incorporated the use of the stream system to manage the 18 ramps over 14 miles on I-25 on the northbound side coming into Denver from the south. So you can see in the map there on the right-hand side, the blue corridor represents our project, and we controlled all of the ramps moving northbound into downtown Denver. So the pilot project was deployed over 9 months, broken into 3 separate phases. Once we had all of the ITS infrastructure installed in the field, we started the system, but we weren't actually doing control. We did that so that we could get background data for our project so that we could have an apples to apples comparison. Prior to the project, although there were vehicle detection in the corridor, it wasn't at the level of accuracy that we need for smart freeways. So a key part of the project was upgrading that vehicle detection capabilities so that we could get a far more accurate data flow. So we did 4 months of data collection with the new system in order to give us that baseline for comparison. We then activated the ramp meters on the arterial ramps only. So there were 15 of those along the length of the corridor. So we started the ramp metering on the arterial ramps, ran that for about 4 months to see how that worked. And then we activated 3 freeway-to-freeway ramp meters on I-225, E-470, and C-470, the 3 freeway-to-freeway connections with I-25 in our corridor. And that was the full deployment that started in the spring of 2022 and ran for about 5 months until the pilot period ended and the evaluation commenced. So it gave us some quite robust results, and I'm going to present some of those key findings to you now. This first slide shows a series of heat plots on the right side of the exhibit there that kind of look like bruises on skin. The lighter color is where we're seeing free flow traffic. The darker purples, the darker the shade gets, the more congested it was getting at different times of day. The left column represents the baseline conditions. So that was that first 4 months of data collection. This happens to be Wednesdays for the month of September in 2021. And you can see fairly pronounced periods of congestion in both the AM and PM peaks along the whole corridor. For those that are not familiar with heat plots, it's basically reflecting the traffic conditions along the full length of the corridor, starting from the southernmost in the bottom of the exhibit to the northernmost in the upper part of the exhibit. And again, those purple blotches represent the onset of congestion and the slowdown of traffic as a result of that. You can see when you compare that with the full deployment on the right side that there's a pretty noticeable reduction in the amount of bruising or the amount of delay congestion that we were seeing in the corridor, particularly in the PM peak period. And on several occasions, it almost went away. Now, we didn't completely resolve it in the case of the Colorado project, and that was largely because of some of the compromises that had been made for the pilot project to keep the cost down. With some additional enhancements, we're pretty confident that we probably could have got rid of most of those areas of congestion. The other factor that really, or 2 other factors that really contributed to the continuing congestion that we did observe, 1, crashes. We weren't successful in substantially reducing the number of crashes in the corridor. And so you can see in that uppermost exhibit some really dark blotches there. Those are the result of crashes and the congestion that forms behind crashes. And the second was we only controlled a section of the freeway. We didn't control all the way into downtown. And so you can see congestion spilling back from downstream of our study area into our project area. And that resulted in some delays that were being experienced that were beyond our control. When we look at some different data, overall, in terms of travel times, with the blue bars representing the before case, the orange representing the arterial only, and the green representing the freeway, the full operations. Again, nominal reductions in travel times during the AM peak period. You can see in the line graph, there's a very, very abrupt increase in traffic that happens in the corridor in the AM peak period. Right around 7 o'clock, everyone gets on the freeway and starts to go to work. And so the system had some challenges trying to control that abrupt increase in demand. As a side note, the quality of the data that we're getting allows us to see some of these behaviors and then allows agencies like your own to start to educate the public. If we start to tell them, don't all get on the road at 7 a.m., we can help to offset some of these impacts that we're observing in the system. But you can see in the afternoon peak period, we're getting some more significant benefit from the project, particularly in the full deployment. We saw about a 20% reduction in the travel time in the corridor, about 5 minutes. And that is easily seen in both the bar chart exhibit on the far right and also the line graph underneath, where you can see that green line, substantially lower travel times compared to the before case and also the arterial only condition. The really heavy lift in the project was the reduction in overall delay in the corridor. We saw about a 50% reduction in the total delay, the aggregate delay that all drivers are experiencing in the corridor. And this is really the most significant result and really what we try to strive for when we do these smart freeway projects. And that was in an environment coming out of COVID where VMT was increasing. So we saw sustained and slightly increasing VMT at the same time that we were getting a very significant drop in delay as a result of the project. And that was the outcome that we were looking for. So as you may expect, we did see some increases in the delay on the ramps themselves as a result of the introduction of the coordinated adaptive ramp metering. However, the delays on the ramps were all kept to an average well below 2 minutes. There were a few occasions where we got close to 4-minute delays on the ramps. That is the maximum threshold that we set in the software. We don't want to see delays of longer than 4 minutes because obviously drivers start to become impatient. As a point of reference, Caltrans can often use 7 to 9 minute delays on their ramp metering system. So this is still a very favorable result. But you can see in the slide there that in many cases, the ramp delays were 30 seconds or to a minute, with increases of about 30 seconds as an average across all of the ramps in the corridor. So although there was a slight impact, it's clearly offset by the 4+ minute time savings that we're getting as a result of the project itself. So overall, the findings from the Smart 25 project, there were clear improvements in a variety of performance measures, especially in terms of the travel time savings and the reduction in delay in the corridor, which were, again, results that we were expecting and we're pleased to see being observed. Streams was very effective at its job of managing the traffic flows within the corridor to achieve those outcomes, but at the same time, controlling the ramp queues so that way we never saw excessive wait times on the ramps, and there were no reported incidents where the ramps themselves backed up onto arterial streets. So overall, 300,000 daily drivers got to benefit from these improvements in their commute with that 50% reduction in delay. So you can imagine that with those types of benefits that we've seen from the projects in Melbourne and also in Denver, that there is interest from other agencies here in the United States. So the Riverside County Transportation Commission is one of those. So I know there's a few RCTC members on the call that are probably very familiar with this presentation and the project itself. So I apologize for the repetitive nature of that. But for those that aren't, RCTC is working on a smart freeways pilot project of their own. This is in the city of Temecula in the southern end of the I-15 corridor in Riverside County, where it comes out of San Diego County. On the northbound side. We will be controlling 3 ramps, 3 service interchanges in that section our Temecula Parkway, Rancho California, and Winchester. And actually, the Winchester ramps are going to be integrated into the new French Valley Parkway Phase 2 project that's currently being constructed in the area. So we'll actually be adding ramp metering to those connectors as part of this project. And this is really to try and address what you see in the photograph, the chronic recurring congestion that we see in that corridor. Basically, for about 8 hours of the day in the afternoons, we see that section of freeway break down and cause backups that extend for many miles from the 215 diverge back into San Diego County. So this is something that we're trying to mitigate by introducing the CARM concept. So the project will feature the use of CARM as a key element, but there's some other associated improvements that are taking place to help address some of the issues that we've seen in the corridor. Of course, with CARM, we need to ensure that we have the enhanced data that we need in order to operate the system. So we're upgrading the data, the vehicle detection systems along the corridor. We're adding some CCTV in order to help us operate the system. We're going to be using a part-time shoulder lane use for one of the ramp meter locations where we have some design constraints. So Caltrans has agreed to allow us to use a part-time shoulder use in that location so that we can reduce the weave distance on the merge downstream of the ramp meter. We're also going to be introducing advisory variable speed limits. For those familiar with that corridor, there's a pretty significant downgrade that comes out of San Diego County into Temecula. And when we were doing our initial studies, we saw speeds in excess of 100 miles an hour with some of the vehicles coming down that grade. And then they're hitting that congestion very abruptly. So we will be adding advisory variable speed limits as well as advisory message signs with the speed limit signs to warn traffic coming down that grade when there is slowed conditions ahead, so that hopefully we can get them to slow down and improve the safety at that location. The project got its design approvals about 6 weeks ago. Caltrans approved the PS&E on the job. So now RCTC is in the process of finalizing the bid documents with an expectation that the project will go out to bid by the end of this calendar year. So we're ticking down with 2 months to go. It's expected that construction will take about a year, so that will happen next year. And then the operations are expected to start sometime in early 2025. There's a 2-year evaluation period that will happen as part of the pilot. And obviously through that 2 years, we'll be monitoring the performance in the corridor and reporting that back to RCTC and hopefully back to you as well to let you know how things are going. In Northern California, in the Bay Area, for the Contra Costa Transportation Authority, CCTA, we're also implementing CARM as part of their Innovate 680 program. Innovate 680 has a whole range of solutions that they're implementing for the 680 corridor, which is really the main street through Contra Costa County in the East Bay. So obviously, CARM is an integral element of that. The project itself, what we call the AT-CARM project, the Advanced Technology Coordinated Adaptive Ramp Metering project, will cover the full 25 miles, will ultimately cover the full 25 miles of I-680 in Contra Costa County with coordinated adaptive ramp metering. The first segment that will be deployed is the segment highlighted in blue in the map. So it's in the southern half of the 680 corridor on the northbound side. Covering 14 ramps that extend from El Costa, which is at the Alameda County line in the south, up to State Route 24, a major east-west freeway that enters Contra Costa County. That project is currently going through the PAD process, as well as systems engineering, with the expectation that those documents will be complete by the end of this calendar year. So again, a couple months away. It's expected that the CARM elements will ultimately get integrated into a Caltrans shop project that's also happening in the corridor and is installing traditional Caltrans ramp metering along the corridor. So we are planning the incremental additional improvements that we need and are adding those to the shop project. So it's a very robust partnership with Caltrans that's happening as part of that project. And ultimately, the construction will also be consolidated into that shop project. All of the construction will happen at once, so that way both the Caltrans job and the CARM get implemented together. We don't want a situation, of course, where Caltrans finishes their project and then we follow along immediately after and start tearing things up again. So that one is expected to be up and running by late 2025, 2026 timeframe. And then finally, back when Colorado was starting their journey, Utah did a feasibility study looking at the feasibility of smart freeways on a section of on I-15 through Salt Lake City. They determined it to be feasible and added it to their programming cycle. It's now come up to the top of their programming cycle. So we're doing a reevaluation of that feasibility study to help break it into implementable segments. So we've identified 4 segments on the I-15 corridor, those highlighted in red on the exhibit on the right. Those are currently being developed with conceptual designs and cost estimates to help UDOT basically implement a strategy to move forward with smart freeways in their environment. So we're excited that we have a number of projects going on, including one in your backyard. And on that, I will end my presentation and happily answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Henderson. At this time, I'd like to see if there are any members of the public who wish to speak on this item. Okay, so we'll go ahead and start with TC committee members in person. And I see over here. Yeah, please.
Good morning. My question is probably just a general question. It's probably an RCTC question, but along for the smart freeway projects, multiple projects, are any of them going to be tied to any freeway service programs that are also in place? I know RCTC has a freeway service program. Will they get data in real time as far as accidents? Will they be connected at some point?
Yeah, so certainly as part of the project, the availability of data is important. It's important for us on the performance evaluation side. The data that we collect will also be pushed through to the Caltrans TMC so that they will be able to benefit from that same information. And obviously we'll want to be monitoring incidents. Safety is an evaluation measure that RCTC has identified for the project. So yeah, we'll definitely be trying to link to safety information and be able to assess the outcomes of the project from a safety perspective.
I think Ms. Wallace, you have your hand up.
So, in your project for, Denver, when you said about the accidents, did that contribute to them driving fast and not, looking at that pilot program? Is that what caused?
Yeah, we were hopeful. We were certainly hopeful that by improving the flow of traffic in the corridor, that we would see a safety benefit in the Colorado project. Mm-hmm. When we did the analysis, it was very difficult to draw any definitive conclusions from what we saw. Overall, we think the rate of accidents actually went down in the corridor, but we still saw a fairly high number of accidents in the corridor, and particularly severe accidents. That was largely a product of the speed in the corridor. Like many freeways in the United States, I'm sorry, we saw very high volume, very high speed traffic in the corridor, particularly when it was under free flow conditions, vehicles doing 80 miles plus in an urban environment. And that really is reflected in the crash rates that we see in I-25, both before the project and during the pilot project period. Again, we were hopeful that we could get that to go away or at least reduce it more significantly, but it was inconclusive in our evaluation results.
Thank you.
Thank you. Jan Harney.
Thank you so much, and thank you for the presentation. And I remember when SCAG went over to Australia, this was one of the main things they came back with was the smart freeways. And I was part of the RCTC presentation, and I will tell you that my colleagues at RCTC grilled you, and appropriately, but you had all the answers. And this is exciting. And certainly the 15 is just such a mess in that area. And we're really looking forward to seeing how that's implemented and the positive results. So thank you so much for this.
Thank you.
Jan, should we grill him a little more?
Go for it.
What? Go for it. You lead.
Alrighty. Well, let's go ahead and start with, because I'm not seeing any of the hands up here. Let's go virtually. Carol Moore. You're muted.
Thank you. Sorry. Thank you for your presentation. I find it fascinating. First off, I had several. Is there a comparison per mile? So you have you've implemented your program versus an additional lane. Is there any way to compare that?
I mean, you can compare it in terms of cost. These
That's what I
projects will
meant.
cost, yeah, these projects will cost probably to do a smart freeways deployment probably of the size of the Colorado job, we're talking tens of millions. If you were to try and add it, or CDOT had completed the T-Rex project about 10 years before our project, and that was a $2.1 billion project to add one lane. So the
I was aware
economies
that
are
I thought it
very
was
significant.
I thought it was 100 million per mile, but anyway, okay.
No.
Then the other, I mean, for the add the lane. Then the other one was to compare the investment with that, which is kind of the same thing. But I had one more question that had to do with what I understood, and I saw the ones in Colorado and the one in Contra Costa and Riverside, and of course Utah. What I didn't have full understanding of is the sections were the on-ramp. And then I saw the lanes were darkened. Was this always on-ramp related, or were there other benefits from the lanes themselves? Is that a clear question? Do you know what I'm asking?
Yeah, no, I know what you mean. Yeah, so for the Colorado project, as well as the projects that are being developed for RCTC and CCTA, all of the improvements are confined to the ramps themselves. Like, this is basically implementing the coordinated adaptive ramp metering. There are some improvements to the ramps that we make in order to accommodate the ramp metering, the ramp metering system that we're using. So we add additional capacity on the ramps. We also add additional discharge. So when we have the opportunity to get more vehicles onto the freeway, when there's a gap in freeway traffic, we want to be able to release them as quickly as we can. So we do add additional capacity at the threshold in order to do that release. But none of these projects integrated any mainline improvements in any of these corridors. I did make the comment on the Colorado project that if there was a few other things that we could do, we feel like we could really resolve a lot more of those congestion, blotches that you saw in those heat plots. And some of those things would be more strategic improvements on the main line. So sort of extending auxiliary lanes or braiding a couple of the key weaves that we have in that corridor. But obviously those were above and beyond the scope of what we were doing for our pilot project.
Okay, one of the quick ones, this is a really valuable idea. One of the quick ones that I keep addressing, and that is, we know when you get to 12 to 1,400 people, you start getting these clots. And I wondered, is this ready yet to address that? How you have some space, you're leaving the space between the car in front of you, and then somebody else wants to go faster and they quickly jump in, fill the space, then you back off because you have to. The person behind you does. Can you address that at all, or is that wait still ahead? Go ahead. Thank you.
No, that's exactly the scenario that we're trying to use this system to avoid. So there's a real sweet spot in terms of the density of traffic, the number of vehicles that you can have on the freeway in a certain amount of space in order to maintain those optimum traffic flows. So basically what this system is doing is at very regular intervals along the freeway corridor, the vehicle detectors are monitoring that density, and they're looking for that optimal flow rate at all of those locations. And as soon as it starts to see that volatile behavior that you were just talking about, where vehicles are starting to slow down because traffic's changing lanes in front of them and there's now not enough space for them to do that safely, the system detects that and will hold back traffic from the ramps entering the freeway in order to ensure that that doesn't turn into a flow breakdown. And that only needs to happen for a very short period of time. We might think that traffic congestion is such that, well, once you start that slowdown, you have to hold them for hours. That's not reality. Traffic is very volatile in very finite pieces or slices. So the system is basically trying to manage that volatility continuously through the peak periods so that we can prevent those flow breakdowns and prevent that congestion from forming behind it. Once the flow breaks down, we go from about 1,800 vehicles per hour to about 1,200 vehicles per hour in an instant. And as you can imagine, that causes a lot of disruption to traffic, and we see that all around this region. So what this system's trying to do is to sustain those higher flow rates longer so that we can get better productivity overall.
Carol, thank you for grilling them. Appreciate it. Already, very good. Did I miss anyone? I'm not seeing anyone in person or virtually. Okay, I think we're good.
Thank you.
Mr. Anderson, thank you so much for your presentation.
Thank you.
All righty. Let's go ahead and move on to agenda item 9, which is SCAG's Clean Transportation Technology Compendium. And Roland,
All right, thank you. My name is Roland Doak. I am the planning supervisor here at SCAG under the Mobility Planning and Goods Movement Department. And I'll provide a little bit of context before handing it off to our consultant. So on April 6th of 2023, the Regional Council adopted Resolution 23654-5, which formalized the Clean Transportation Technology Policy. The policy provides SCAG with a framework to support the development, commercialization, and deployment of zero or near zero emission transportation system in an effort to enhance air quality, reduce GHG, achieve sustainability goals, all while adopting a tech neutral stance. Included in the resolution was a directive for staff to prepare a clean tech compendium, which would aid in the development of Connect SoCal 2024 and offer decision makers a comprehensive set of various clean technologies to potentially implement in their respective local jurisdictions. SCAG, with the assistance from ICF, has since then finalized the compendium, and Sam Pornazeri, a Senior Director of Clean Tech and Energy, is here with us virtually to deliver a presentation outlining the key aspects of the compendium. So I'll now hand it off to Sam.
Thank you, Roland. And good morning, Chair and the committee members. As Roland mentioned, I'm Sam Pornazeri, Senior Director of Clean Transportation and Energy at ICF. We had the pleasure to work with your staff over the past 10 months in developing the Clean Transportation Technology Compendium. And in advance, I will apologize if I cough. I'm just recovering from a bad cold. So if I go on mute, that means I'm coughing. So let me start my presentation by first defining clean transportation technology. According to SCAG, clean transportation technologies are zero and near zero emission vehicles and their related infrastructure and supporting products that minimize environmental impacts throughout their life cycle. With that in mind, we initiated this project with the goal of compiling a technology compendium, laying out available zero and near zero emission technologies, and provide information on each technology with respect to their emission, benefits, readiness level, implementation, cost, market conditions, and ability to scale. Our focus has been on 4 major modes of transportation, namely passenger vehicles, medium and heavy duty vehicles, transit buses, and rail. But why is it important to understand the landscape of clean technology? As you all know, mobile sources are a significant contributor to air quality issues in the South Coast area. In 2022, transportation contributed to 81% of nitrogen oxides emissions, a precursor to ozone, and 25% of fine particulate matter emissions in the South Coast Air Basin. Aside from air quality issues, California also has ambitious goals for adoption of zero-emission vehicles. In 2020, Governor Newsom signed an executive order which established ambitious goals to have 100% of new passenger vehicles sold in California to be zero-emission vehicles by 2035, transition all drayage truck to zero-emission by 2035, and the rest of the medium and heavy-duty vehicles to zero-emission by 2045 where feasible. So as part of this compendium, we did not just focus on the vehicles, but we also studied their charging and fueling infrastructure, as well as supporting products that facilitate adoption of these technologies and are a vital part of the clean transportation technology ecosystem. We studied each technology with respect to a variety of different specifications. Firstly, we look at the potential for GHG emission reductions, gauging how each technology contributes to our sustainability goals. Criteria pollutant emission reductions were also a key focus, ensuring we're mindful of air quality and public health implications. We analyzed the distance that each vehicle technology can travel with one refueling or one event of charging, also known as the vehicle range, understanding the limitation and capabilities of each technology. We looked into cost, longevity. We also explored the available technical assistance, ensuring that there are adequate resources for implementation and maintenance. The potential for technology adoption has also been evaluated. And lastly, we calculated the total cost of ownership, providing a comprehensive understanding of financial implications over time. Together, all these criteria really guided us in making informed recommendations part of this compendium. In conducting this compendium and developing this compendium, we utilized a diverse range of tools and methods. We started with an extensive desk research to gather existing data and insight from a wide array of sources. This work was then complemented by a clean technology survey which provided us with current and specific information directly from stakeholders and experts in the field. And to further deepen our understanding and gain nuanced perspectives, we conducted one-on-one interviews with industry professionals and key players. So now let's get into some of the findings summarized in the compendium. Starting with the passenger vehicles, in our recent analysis for 2022, we observed a notable uptick in the adoption of zero-emission vehicles in the SCAG region, with sales exceeding 175,000 light-duty units. Demonstrating the breadth of choices available to consumers, there were 50 battery electric vehicle models, 51 plug-in hybrid electric vehicle models, and 3 fuel cell electric vehicle models on the market as of December 2022. The current generation of battery electric vehicle model present impressive ranges, spanning from 100 miles to 500 miles. While there is an initial premium of roughly about $18,000 for electric cars and SUVs, it's important to note that these vehicles present long-term economic advantages. Moving on to the medium and heavy-duty vehicles in the North American market, we're observing an expanding array of options for zero-emission medium and heavy-duty vehicles, with a total of 134 models available. Breaking this down further, 9 of these models are fueled by hydrogen, while the remainder predominantly adopts battery electric technology. However, within our specific region, there's a presence of only 178 units of these vehicles. While transitioning to this sustainable option is the future, it's worth highlighting the current barriers, especially the capital cost, which are approximately 3 times higher than traditional diesel counterparts. Now let's take a look at buses. In the SCAG region, buses dominate the heavy-duty zero-emission vehicle landscape. Among them, transit buses are the most prominent, followed by school buses and then coach buses. While the move toward these zero-emission alternatives is promising, there's a notable financial barriers to consider. The capital cost of these zero-emission vehicle options is substantially steeper, estimated around $1 million in comparison to $500,000 typically required for their diesel counterpart. The rail sector is embarking on a transformative journey, slowly transitioning to zero-emission technologies. Although these initiatives are still in very early stages, the momentum is tangible. Metrolink, for instance, has a moonshot goal to transition their rail fleet to zero-emission by 2028, laying the groundwork with the Antelope Valley line. On a similar path, the San Bernardino County Transportation Authority has set its sights on unveiling pioneering locomotives powered by both battery electric and hydrogen technologies as early as 2024. Moreover, BNSF Railway is also planning to replace a traditional diesel line haul locomotive with an innovative zero-emission battery-operated version. In tandem with all these individual company efforts, larger transportation bodies are also stepping up. Caltrans, for example, is working toward a goal of transitioning the entire intercity rail system to be fully zero-emission by 2035. Let's now shift gears to charging and fueling infrastructure. There are a suite of different charging infrastructure currently in the market, from well-known level 2 and DC fast chargers that we see across the region to less familiar pantograph, wireless, and canopy charging technologies. We studied all of these in the compendium. With respect to the adoption of charging infrastructure, currently the region is equipped with approximately 3,700 DC fast chargers and 33,000 level 2 chargers. However, we need a lot more. The California Energy Commission AB 2127 report paints a larger picture, forecasting that by 2035, California will need roughly 2 million charging stations, half of which is 1 million, is anticipated to be within the SCAG region itself. Southern California also has an expansive network of hydrogen fueling stations. Within the SCAG region, there are currently 39 active hydrogen fueling stations, and the momentum continues with plans for 21 more in the pipeline. Notably, 5 of these operational stations cater specifically to heavy-duty vehicles. Southern California is also known for its many natural gas stations. The natural gas fueling landscape in the region exhibit a balanced distribution spanning 4 out of the 6 counties. Los Angeles emerges prominently in this setup, leading with a total of 34 natural gas stations. When it comes to supporting products, the compendium made its best effort to capture a variety of different products that play a crucial role in advancing the clean transportation technology adoption. These integral elements not only advances the adoption of such technology, but also optimize their functioning. The catalog encompasses essential products like battery energy storage, battery management system, vehicle-to-grid or vehicle-to-building solution, charging management solutions, and fleet telematics. When assessing the transition to zero emission, several challenges stand out. From a cost perspective, the high upfront prices of these vehicles is a significant barrier. In terms of technology readiness, we are faced with limited model availability, longer charging times, and sometimes supply chain issues. Additionally, our current infrastructure does not adequately support ZEVs. Public ZEV infrastructure is lacking, and constraints such as limited space for depot charging and broader real estate challenges exist. On the consumer side, many potential users have limited knowledge of the new technologies and associated incentives associated with them, and there's a general lack of confidence in technologies itself. Lastly, the absence of standardized vehicle and equipment performance criteria, inconsistency in infrastructure design, limited funding, and delays in permitting further impede this transition. Despite encountering multiple barriers, there is a suite of policies at the federal, state, and local levels aimed at promoting zero-emission vehicles. However, it is obvious that there are significant gaps that still need to be addressed. Firstly, the lack of affordability for ZEVs poses a challenge, especially for low and moderate income communities. To put it into perspective, the average cost of a passenger ZEV is roughly $18,000 more than that of a conventional internal combustion engine vehicles. Additionally, there's a pressing need for greater investment in charging and fueling infrastructure. Current estimates indicate that to effectively bridge the existing infrastructure gap, we would need to install around 3,000 chargers every week for light-duty vehicles, an additional 430 chargers for heavy-duty vehicles across the state between 2023 and 2030. As you know, half of those could end up being in the SCAG region. So to foster the adoption of clean technologies, the compendium ends with a set of strategic recommendations. Firstly, we advocated for targeted incentive programs to financially motivate individuals and businesses to make the switch. Enhanced public education and community outreach are crucial to raise awareness about the benefits of ZEVs. We also suggest revising building codes to incorporate clean technology infrastructure like charging station and adjusting land use and zoning to prioritize sustainable mobility. Promoting public-private partnership can also help leverage resources and expertise in the ZEV sector. Furthermore, providing technical assistance can guide potential adopters, while workforce development ensures a skilled workforce to support this transition. Lastly, it's very important for leaders and regional partners such as municipality to lead by example, showcasing the tangible benefits and feasibility of embracing zero-emission vehicles. With that, I'll conclude my presentation. Would be happy to answer any questions you might have. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. What valuable information for policymakers. Before we have our Transportation Committee members speak, is there any members of the public who wish to speak on this item? Okay, we'll go inside the room. Larry McKellen and then Jan Harnick.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. In this study, did you look at the electrical generation requirements and the lack, or how much more generation we're going to need to support the electric vehicles?
We did not specifically look into the demand on the utility on the grid resulting from the electric vehicles. I can say that there are many different studies across the state being done to look at how the adoption of electric vehicles, I mean, both in the passenger side as well as in the medium and heavy duty, is going to increase the demand, electricity demand, as well as the capacity for on the utility side. But this study was not specifically looking into that. So, I mean, but we can definitely point you to other studies that have done that. And California Public Utility Commission is very close to looking into that as well.
Thank you.
Jan Harnick.
Thank you very much. And I know we're moving towards this, I think, relatively rapidly, and there's not anybody who doesn't want cleaner air, certainly. And here are my concerns, because we talk about it, it's almost like we have policy blur here, because we talk about the electric vehicles, but having a freeway full of electric vehicles doesn't help when we compare it to a freeway full of combustion engine vehicles. So we have this kind of policy blur where we're trying to take the cars off the road, but yet we kind of feel justified when we have electric cars. And I think it's a problem. And I love that we talked about education and land use, because those are two things that will definitely help out with those issues. But what I'm wondering, and I think about, we hear about how much heavier all these vehicles are. The electric vehicles are than combustion engine vehicles. And then the negative impact they have on our highways and our freeways. And I think at some point we're going to have to integrate that thinking into this so that we can, when we talk about education, so we can help people understand that we need to take cars off the road, because the weight of those, all of those vehicles has a significant impact on our infrastructure. And if we just fill it up with electric vehicles, we're going to need to expand our vehicles, not only just expand our infrastructure, not just repair the infrastructure that's being impacted by the increased weight. So those are a few things. And I don't know, this doesn't impact necessarily this report we've gotten, but it's something we really need to look at and factor into our education. So those are just some thoughts, a little scrambled, but I think they're things we'll have to look at. Thank you.
Yeah, well said. Jose Luis Solachi.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As former context, 4 of us on this board sit on AQMD. And I think I really appreciate Jan's term, policy blur, of all the work that we're all doing collectively through AQMD, SCAG, our utility friends, and just the overall conversation that's happening over this. I personally question the 2035 a deadline or a goal. I just don't know how realistic that really is. Again, I didn't put it together. I'm not the governor of California, and I'm not, but I do question the realistic timeline of if that's even realistic. So I do want to encourage this committee and SCAG as a whole to continue with this study. I think it's critical. I think data is important so that we can make decisions and that policy conversation that is continuous, and so that we could see how we're going to meet that, that goal. I know it's a goal as well, not only a deadline. So. And I say this from the angle also, I drive a Tesla, and, I go to charging stations and, sometimes they're full, or sometimes I went to a Galaxy game when I use this example a lot. I was like, oh, I'll charge my car at the Galaxy game. Well, yeah, there's like 12 stations, but there's 800 cars. So I'm just the infrastructure is not there yet. I think we're all striving towards that. And I think we're going in the right direction in the sense of goals, but I just don't know how they're realistic. And I'm really concerned about the infrastructure and mandating that we, eliminate, cars essentially. So just want to put that into context, but I just want to encourage this committee again and SCAG as a whole to continue with the work that, we do in collecting data and what that looks like. And as we move forward with this discussion, that we are realistic with these timelines. Thank you.
Thank you. Thomas Wong.
Thanks. I'd just echo some of those sentiments as well in terms of appreciate that we put together this study and this information. I think there's a lot more to gather and to help share out to the cities in the SCAG region, particularly as all the cities in our fleets are under the ACF requirements to start to transition to zero emission. There are a lot of challenges for us and everyone else getting to zero emissions or starting to phase out into zero emissions by 2035 and beyond, infrastructure and otherwise, but also just from an awareness standpoint for our fleets in Monterey Park as we're transitioning, the availability of what models are even there for us to transition from internal combustion engines to zero emission, what those are, how do we help our dozens of jurisdictions get on the same page as some jurisdictions start to test out and pilot some of these new technologies and the lessons learned. How can SCAG play a role in helping to share more of that information with cities to share information as we're all needing to transition under legal and regulatory requirements. And the more that SCAG can kind of provide that information, gather that information from throughout the region and outside the region too, to help with lesson sharing so we can accelerate some of these adoption, getting over these challenges for adoption would be helpful.
Thank you. I'm not seeing any of the hands in-house here, so I'm going to go to our virtual TC members. We'll start with you, Trish Kelly, and then we'll go to you, Russell Betts.
Yes, thank you. Similar to the last comment that we heard, I know that this compendium was developed as a tool and a resource guide for the local jurisdictions and as well as other stakeholders. So I'm wondering, in addition to transmitting this compendium to the local jurisdictions, if SCAG staff would also plan to set up any special workshops
Hi, this is Roland.
or training sessions where you can take the time to walk through the highlights with the local jurisdictions staff. Is that anything we've considered?
Hi, this is Roland, planning supervisor here. Yes, that is currently being considered. When we developed this report, at first it was originally envisioned as like a technical report that would support the development of Connect SoCal, and then it became so much more, right, to set a foundation for the clean technology program as a whole. So that's the first phase. The report itself is the first phase. Second phase is right now we have a set of fact sheets that are being developed. Now they're a bit too high level, but at the very least they provide a digestible set of language that provides like a high level overview. After which we're going to try to integrate some sort of, we're going to discuss internally to figure out if we can integrate to some of our existing programs, whether it be a Toolbox Tuesday, maybe bring in some guest speakers, or if funding or resources are allowed, maybe focus in on some of these topic items, right, and do a deeper dive. So yeah.
Thank you. Russell Betts.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't think you can look at this subject without looking at the demand on the grid. I think that's got to be included. I'm sure that's on everybody's mind as we're listening to this presentation. And you also have hydrogen concerns. That's not in plentiful supply right now. So if hydrogen was the answer, where's that going to come from? There's not presently enough electricity to do this, and I don't see us in a race to build power plants. And got some other issues that need to be considered if everybody's going to switch over to electric vehicles. Is presently the throughput on a gasoline station is it can handle many cars. I don't have the exact number in front of me. In a short period of time with a very small footprint. EV charging stations are going to take up a lot of real estate and are very slow. If our entire town went to electric cars, nobody'd be driving anywhere because they couldn't charge them. We had at one time in SCAG many years ago a study on pollution that was in proximity to the freeway corridors, and some of the pollutants that identified were rubber. I don't know if people are aware of it, but electric vehicles wear out tires at a much faster clip. So now you've got much more rubber pollution on the side of the roads. There's a whole bunch of studies that need to be done here. And I think at some point in time, and I've asked for this before, there needs to be a presentation on only where is the electricity, where is the fuel sources coming from that are going to make 2035 possible. Because 2035 is going to be here, and I don't think we'll be able to pull this one off. So I don't want to sound like a negative Nelly here, but or I guess negative Ned, but we really need to get serious about where this is, what makes this possible. And thank you, Mr. Chair. That's my 2 cents worth today.
Thank you. Okay, I'm not seeing any other hands up. Did I miss anyone? Oh, Eddie.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to respond to Member Betts as well as the earlier comment by Member McAllen. There are some currently ongoing study that SCAG is conducting specific to medium and heavy duty trucks and the transition to zero emission and the supporting infrastructure need. As a part of that effort, we are going to be looking at overall demand on the energy grid, what the supply looks like. Inevitably, it's very specific to the heavy duty truck market. However, we need to understand the full scale of what's actually happening and the demand on the system. And so we will be providing that information, updates to that study in the coming months. And so I just wanted to let you be aware of that.
Great, thank you. That's good news.
Thank you, Annie. Okay. All right, I think not seeing any of the hands. Mr. Ponazeri, thank you so much for your presentation. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
All right, let's go ahead and move on to agenda item 10, federal transportation funding in the SCAG region, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, and Warren Whitaker.
Logan. All right, let me just make sure that this is up and running. I'll wait a second for it to pop on the screen for those of you in the room. There we go. The purpose of this presentation is to provide more information on the resources the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, or IJA, has supplied to our region, and to provide a better understanding of how federal transportation funding flows to our region. Additionally, this presentation responds to a request made at the last TC meeting. IJA, also known as the Bipartisan Infrastructure Bill, or BILL, is the most recent federal surface transportation reauthorization legislation. It defines how much federal transportation funding will be available and how it can be used. While most reauthorizations include incremental adjustments to existing programs, each bill is an opportunity to reflect current congressional priorities. It's important to recognize that funding levels with IJA are not typical and are considered a once-in-a-generation investment in the nation's surface transportation system. As indicated here, federal transportation funding is available to the state through either formula or discretionary grants. Based on a recent snapshot, California has received approximately $7.5 billion in federal formula funds and $2.7 billion in federal discretionary grant funding to date from IJA. Focusing first on the federal highway formula funding, around 60% of federal highway formula dollars are at the state's discretion and are targeted to support the state's needs. While many state many state transportation programs, federal dollars are mixed with state dollars and then flow through the individual state program. You're likely familiar with the two examples that are listed here, the STIP and the SHOP. Roughly 40% of federal highway formula funding is targeted to regional and local needs. Of that amount, roughly 40% are targeted to non-state needs. Sorry. About 40% of that 40, so there's 60% that's focused on the state, selected by the state for state needs. And then there's 40% that's focused on regional and local needs. Within that 40%, roughly 40% of that is competitively selected by the state through programs like the Highway Bridge Program. Okay, so big pie, 60% selected by the state for state needs, 40% focused on local and regional needs. Of that 40% slice, 40% of that is then selected by the state, largely by Caltrans, through a number of programs, Highway Bridge being one example. Just want to be crystal clear here. No federal highway formula funding flows directly to cities and counties. You can't look at a table and say, this is my share based on the formula funds. Now, going back to that 40% of the 40%, well, this is that flip side of that. So the 60% of that 40%. So remember, a little bit earlier, we just talked about the carbon reduction program. Well, that's one of the kind of three components there, and more, a larger share of that is actually the CMAQ and SDBG, the program guidelines that you approved, as well as the regional council back in June. As noted here, SCAG is responsible for selecting projects to be funded with CMAQ, STPG, and CRP dollars. These dollars cannot be suballocated, nor can project selection be delegated to another agency per federal requirements. In contrast to federal highway funding, federal transit formula dollars do flow to transit operators. Here, SCAG is required to determine the allocation of annual apportionments. We provide those splits to the county transportation commissions and certain transit operators. For example, Antelope Valley Transit Authority and Santa Clarita Transit. The CTCs in turn use those splits for sharing with the applicable transit operators in their respective counties. Then the transit operators use that info for specific grants through the Federal Transit Administration. I want to give kudos here to the state for this website and this actually pretty cool mapping tool. The map that I generated here is selecting projects from the SCAG region with federal transportation dollars. Through the website, you can filter down through different funding programs, fiscal year, agency, and project status to do a deeper dive. And as you can see in the map, although it's perhaps a little hard in the room here with the resolution, it actually gets into different congressional districts and such, so you can do kind of slice and dice it a number of different ways. With that, I hoped you gained a better understanding of how federal transportation dollars flow to our region in, I don't know, 5 minutes or less. And that concludes my presentation. I know we can go much deeper dive, but yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Whitaker. I just want to point out that this item was brought to you at the request of Councilmember Ken Mann at the last meeting, Councilmember from Lancaster. Don't know if you want to comment, Mr. Mann, but I'm hoping that whatever concerns or questions you had have been answered by Mr. Whitaker, but certainly happy to take your comments and or questions at this time. I'm not seeing any questions inside the room here. I do see a hand up. And it just says council member, so I'm not, my apologies. If your hand's up, just go ahead and you can go ahead and speak at this time.
Hi, it's Councilmember
Bridget
Lewis. Yes, Councilmember Lewis from Torrance. I want to thank you for bringing this forward to us. I know that in our city, we have a lot of questions about how federal funding is allocated and how it's distributed down through the different mechanisms. So I do appreciate that. Is there a way or a link that I could provide to some of the members of our transportation team leading to some of these slides? I think it would be tremendously helpful other than what's in the agenda.
Councilmember Lewis, we can have staff follow up with the slides for sure and distribute them to the group.
Okay, perfect. That would be helpful. Thank you.
Are there any other TC members who wish to speak at this time? I am not seeing any hands up. Okay, so we can go ahead and move on to agenda item 11, which is the 2023 Go Human Safety Strategies Outcomes. And I will turn it over to Alina Borja. Welcome.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here. My name is Alina Borja, and today I will present the outcomes of SCAG's Office of Traffic Safety grant this year, which focuses on the Go Human Active Transportation Safety and Encouragement campaign. SCAG launched the Go Human program in 2015 to reduce traffic collisions and encourage people to walk and bike more. This was in response to unacceptable traffic safety conditions in our region. Every year, 1,600 people die from traffic collisions, 7,000 sustain serious injuries, and 140,000 people sustain injuries from collisions. These traffic safety burdens fall disproportionately on people who walk and bike, with people who walk and bike making up only 5% of all daily trips, but 36% of all fatalities. With that bit of program background, we'll head into talking about the 2023 Go Human Safety Strategies, which included the Community Hubs Grant Program, the Kit of Parts Lending Library of Demonstration Materials, the co-branded messaging materials, and this year's storytelling campaign. Then we'll wrap up with an overview of the 2024 upcoming strategies and resources. This year, the Go Human program carried out a variety of strategies that resulted in over $360,000 of funding for community-based organizations to carry out 11 traffic safety projects through the Community Hubs Grant Program, 6 oral histories captured through video that spotlight organizations in the region leading traffic safety efforts, more than 6,800 co-branded safety messaging materials, 11 new jurisdiction signatories to the Go Human Traffic Safety Pledge, and 5 temporary demonstrations supported through technical assistance, with 17 demonstrations using the Kit of Parts overall. So breaking this down by county, Imperial County held 3 demonstrations using the Go Human Kit of Parts with an estimated support from the program of $1,000. Riverside County had 2 community hubs projects, 2 demonstrations using the Kit of Parts, 152 co-branded materials distributed, 1 new jurisdiction signatory to the safety pledge, and an estimated investment of over $77,000. San Bernardino hosted 2 community hubs, distributed over 1,000 materials, had 2 new signatories to the safety pledge with an estimated investment of over $91,000. The County of Orange had hosted 2 hubs, 3 demonstrations, distributed almost 4,000 co-branded safety materials, had 3 new signatories to the safety pledge, and an estimated investment of over $96,000. Los Angeles County hosted 4 hubs, 5 demonstrations, distributed over 1,900 materials, had 4 new signatories to the safety pledge, and had an estimated investment of over $247,000. And finally, Ventura hosted 2 community hubs, 1 demonstration using the Kit of Parts, distributed 162 co-branded materials, had 1 new signatory to the safety pledge, and an estimated investment of over $66,000. So getting into the specific programs that Go Human offered this year, the Community Hubs Grant Program is SCAG's funding opportunity for community organizations to lead traffic safety projects. The funded projects were supported with Go Human resources and technical assistance. The eligible applicants for this year's grant program were community-based organizations, nonprofits, and social enterprises, with a maximum funding amount for each project of $40,000, and in total, 11 projects were awarded. The 11 projects that were awarded were funded to carry out creative variety of traffic safety efforts, including visioning charrettes and bicycle safety education from People for Mobility Justice in LA, traffic safety clinics from Highlander Boxing Club in San Bernardino, youth-led walk audits and zine creation from Youth Leadership Institute in Riverside County. And there are some examples of this particular publication, the zine, at the reception desk outside. So I encourage everyone to take a look. And bike repair and maintenance workshops from Bike Ventura, among many other projects. The Hubs projects reached over 200,000 people in the region and distributed thousands of safety materials, including 1,749 helmets, 300 bike lights, 400 digital bike bells. Altogether, over $360,000 were distributed to community organizations through this program. And in its 5th year of providing community grant funds, the Go Human Grant Program has in total distributed more than $1.2 million to traffic safety projects. And this year's awardees accomplished a lot. And in 2023, Go Human partners also received recognition for their past projects in 2022, such as LA Walks and the City of Laguna Niguel, who were awarded by their local sections of the American Planning Association, as well as the Artlands, who was also awarded by their local section for their 2022 mini grant project. And 2 grantees from last year went on to be awarded by APA at the state level: Santa Ana Active Streets for their work in pedestrian safety in the Willard neighborhood of Santa Ana, and Public Matters for their traffic safety work in East LA. Go Human program also offered the Kit of Parts, which is a no-cost engagement tool for jurisdictions to use for temporary demonstrations. More than 17 temporary demonstrations used the Kit of Parts in 2023, 3 of which occurred through a pilot partnership program with the Caltrans Active Transportation Resource Center, and 5 of which occurred with technical assistance from Go Human. Overall, these demonstrations reached over 8,000 people. The 5 demonstrations, which included technical assistance from Go Human, were carried out in Port Hueneme, Santa Ana, Lancaster, Altadena, and Jurupa Valley. This technical assistance included ideation, site planning, permitting, logistics, staffing, promotion, data collection, documentation, and a lot more. More than 100 surveys were collected during these events. SCAG also provides thousands of co-branded safety advertisement materials to local partners. This year, including 1,261 lawn signs, 97 banners, 5,850 postcards, 5 billboards, and more, as you can see on the screen, reaching over 200,000 people. Our safety messaging materials are available to our partners at no cost in a variety of languages spoken in the SCAG region. SCAG also provided resources for partners to tell their important traffic safety stories this year. The storytelling campaign provided resources for partners to tell their story about the impacts of traffic violence in their communities and their work to make change. These efforts resulted in 6 oral history videos, 8 community expert education services, and 11 new commitments from jurisdictions to the Go Human Traffic Safety Pledge. And taking a moment here to spotlight the oral history video project, in which 6 community partners from all 6 SCAG counties recounted their traffic safety work, focusing on their efforts to advance mobility justice in their communities. The partners that were featured in the videos included the Bicycle Tree, Bike Ventura, Los Amigos de la Comunidad, Youth Leadership Institute, Jose Richard Aviles, and the People's Collective for Environmental Justice. These videos will be available on SCAG's YouTube channel later this month. As a reminder, the Safety Pledge is available for any jurisdiction, organization, or individual in the SCAG region to sign on to. It is on our website. This year, new signatories to the Safety Pledge accessed print and digital materials and support, as well as sponsorship funds. Over $8,000 worth of co-branded materials and digital advertising support were provided to new signatories, as well as $14,000 in local event support. So congratulations to the 11 new jurisdiction signatories that are here on the screen. And finally, I'd like to close out with an overview of the 2024 upcoming strategies. SCAG was awarded another year of funding from OTS and will use it to offer Kit of Parts technical assistance, another round of grant funding for community-based organizations, and the continued production and distribution of co-branded safety messaging materials. And you can find more information about Go Human at the website. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. Are there any members of the public who are here who wish to speak at this time? No, I'm not seeing anyone. Anyone in the room? Not seeing anyone. And we have Alan. We can go virtual now. Alan, Mr. Walker?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Go Human's always been an extremely effective program, but I'm wondering, how are you going to reshape it considering the litany of bills the legislature's passed through? Excuse me, allowing on jaywalking, bicycles on sidewalks, and bicycles being able to drive through traffic control devices?
Well, one of the great parts of this program is that we really allow resources for communities and organizations to identify the issues and the solutions that are specific to their communities. I think these resources are like open to hyper-local and very specific to particular neighborhood solutions. So really, we look to our partners and our jurisdictions for those creative solutions to address those new legislations.
Well, I'm not necessarily saying that. I mean, obviously, I'd like to change the legislation, but more than that, when we talk to the public about traffic safety and we explain it's safer to cross at crosswalks, we used to be able to say that's the law, but we can't do that any longer. We explained bicycle safety, and now they don't have to stop at stop signs. I'm just wondering how you change, I guess, your curriculum, or what do you want to call your materials when it comes to active transportation safety when the legislature is allowing pretty much people to do whatever they want to do.
Something I will say about the structure of our program is that we do focus a bit on behavior change, but the focus of our program is on like structural change and street design. So maybe changing the design of the street so that it is safe for everyone to share, rather than focusing on individual behaviors.
Thank you. I think the only point, and you guys are doing a great job. The only point I'm trying to make is that the state's making it extremely challenging for us to convey traffic safety when they do something different than that. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, not seeing any of the hands up at this time. Spora, thank you so much again for your presentation. We'll go ahead and move on to agenda item 12, SB 671 Clean Freight Corridor Efficiency Assessment Update. Scott Strelicki. Hope I got that right. Close.
All right, good morning, everyone. Scott Strelicki is the pronunciation, thank you. And then I am the planning supervisor for our goods movement business unit. Let me just see here real quick. Okay. All right. So earlier today, there was an item on the Clean Transportation Technology Compendium, so there'll be a little bit of overlap here. But what we'll be talking more about is the state perspective of their Clean Corridor Efficiency Assessment based on the legislation. Can we go to the next slide, please? Or sorry, am I advancing the slides? Okay. So based on the legislation, SB 671 establishes a clean freight corridor efficiency assessment to be developed by the California Transportation Commission. The goal of the assessment is to identify corridors or segments of corridors and infrastructure needed to support the deployment of zero emission medium duty and heavy duty vehicles. So there are 7 key areas required by the legislation to do an assessment of freight corridors across the state. To determine the top 5 freight corridors as a part of that assessment, to look at projects for infrastructure as a part of the need, as well as other relationships to the infrastructure based on operations, to identify barriers and potential solutions, impact on roads and bridges, and consider methods to avoid displacement for residents, businesses, as well as to look at the benefits as this technology transition occurs. So SCAG has an established working relationship with state agencies, including the California Transportation Commission. As part of that relationship, we started early on to have meetings once it was understood of what would be coming to develop a plan to move forward with. As part of that, we developed a complementary regional process to inform state and level efforts. We have a working relationship with a lot of our regional partners, our county transportation commissions, the ports, et cetera. So we wanted to ensure that there would be a process that we could hold at the regional level to help inform the state's process. And as well as that, what was mentioned earlier today on our zero emission truck infrastructure study, we have some synergies across our projects and programs, and we want to make sure that as part of this process, there's an opportunity to leverage that work as well. So identifying and defining clean freight corridors was a 2-part approach. The first part was leveraged using our regional process to develop what the priorities are for the SCAG region when it comes to freight corridors. You can see the map on the left. The sub map in there to the top is explicitly what I just stated. And then the second part was to determine the top 6 corridors. And this is a slight deviation from legislation for 5. The state or the California Transportation Commission did identify the top 6 corridors. And as a part of that, 4 of those corridors are within the SCAG region, I-5, I-15, I-10, as well as I-40. And as a part of lumped with I-10, but really a connection to the east-west operational moves versus what comes through the San Pedro Bay ports, that was also identified as a part of this corridor assessment. And these top 6 corridors are essentially called an initial viable network. For estimating clean freight infrastructure needs, there was a scenario process that was adhered to. And based on this process, there was a focus on both accelerated battery electric scenario, as well as an accelerated hydrogen fuel cell adoption scenario with a balanced scenario in between. These scenarios were organized by technology as well as public and private facilities supporting infrastructure and were applied for 2025 and 2040 future years. Some of the factors that were involved included the estimated powertrain adoption, which is basically the percentage split between battery electric or hydrogen for each scenario, as well as the cost of vehicle ownership and how different technology choices would fit different truck use cases or markets. To estimate these different splits between the technologies. The approach for estimating energy required included the number of vehicles, looking at the overall volume, vehicle miles traveled, et cetera, and then considering the scenarios of technology adoption, the trip types between these technologies, and then the public-private infrastructure factors required to support the scenarios. As part of the assessment, as I mentioned earlier, the project type piece of that, in addition to infrastructure, there's other considerations when it comes to the operational side. Those include truck parking, increased maintenance, operation needs, safety, as well as the throughput for these corridors. That was not a direct part of this assessment. It was determined that as site locations and stations would be developed, that would be something that would further need to be analyzed. I think that's a key distinction as part of the assessment. So as far as the funding outlook, it's looking at 2 years, 2025, 2035. Obviously, these years, as was mentioned earlier, is a part of the Advanced Clean Fleet Rule. So looking at the earlier year, the estimate of cost is a little over 500 million to just under $1 billion. For these facilities, and for 2035, the estimated range is 10 to 15 billion. I think it's important to note here that these are looking at public facilities. They did do the assessment collectively across private and public facilities as far as estimating the need of infrastructure. Now these cost estimates are explicitly focused on the public facility aspect of that. The expectation from this report is that obviously, there would be public funding and private funding required. There is a belief that there is an amount that can achieve the 2025 year, and clearly there would be a lot more resources required, as has been kind of discussed earlier, on getting towards that 2035 target. Key barriers and solutions were rolled into a kind of a high level perspective of what those relate to, the timing and sequencing of corridor station development, with the idea of streamlining infrastructure and how the development could occur, economic viability or the cost implication upon fleet owners and stakeholders involved in needing equipment, with further support being identified as needed to this transition, and then just the complex ecosystem of the potential stakeholders and those involved in the process, with the goal of having a central delivery team and corridor first approach as a solution for that. Additional implications that were based on the legislation, again, looking at the benefits, I believe the the information that has been quoted in the report is just under 19 billion in savings. Statewide health spending is anticipated from criteria emission reductions through 2040, as well as an estimated 1,700 lives saved as a result of less emissions concurrently. Other important areas are considering the weight impacts on the bridges, as mentioned earlier, the methods to avoid resident business displacement, potential workforce impacts, and potential need for microgrids as a form of resiliency. And then as far as engagement, again, the effort began in December of 2021. There were 14 working group meetings to discuss the development, and bi-weekly meetings were held additionally at the state level. And just to reiterate, SCAG definitely participated in serving as a convener with all our regional partners as a part of that process. Okay, so our final slide here is looking at the recommendations. So public funding is a key recommendation to allocate available funds where feasible to support the build out of this infrastructure. The streamlining that was mentioned earlier, there's an objective to shorten station delivery timeframe and to use a central delivery team to coordinate with local stakeholders as part of that process. The recommendation on supporting fleet needs on the cost implication is that the legislature should create a new limited term 5-year zero emission truck incentive program to assist with this transition. And the central delivery team recommendation is meant to have the intent of this team to act as a lead in coordinating zero emission freight infrastructure planning and implementation, as well as through areas of what the assessment recommendations are. And for issues related to increased weight of zero emission vehicles, the recommendations for Caltrans to evaluate and provide solutions. So that would be something forthcoming. And then the microgrid, again, is just to have the central delivery team assess how this could be applicable and where they could be installed for resiliency needs. So as part of the process, the commission released this draft on September 27th, and there was a comment period, 30-day comment period. The timing of that kind of hit literally last week, right before, we're having this meeting. So SCAG has provided a comment letter. I just want to give a little high-level context in addition from what we've stated as a part of that. So one of the comments is to continue to coordinate and collaborate as SCAG works on its zero emission truck infrastructure study, last mile freight program, et cetera, to directly support transition to a zero emission transportation system. Another comment was to continue to take a holistic approach to infrastructure needs across the SCAG region to support all surface transportation mode investments. And while being supportive of streamlining zero emission station development, we'd like to better understand the state's use of a central delivery team as a mechanism for the process. And then lastly, to continue, we would like to continue to work with the state in identifying the most optimal ways to implement zero emission infrastructure and to ensure that local and regional perspectives are represented in the decision-making process. So overall, we view this assessment as an initial step towards the targets that the state has developed for the medium and heavy duty vehicle markets, and we'll continue to support the region to ensure regional local priorities are reflected as these efforts continue to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Any members of the public who wish to speak at this time? I see no one, and I see Jan Harnick going for her sign. Jan?
First, I wanted to go back to number 9, which was the Clean Transportation Technology Compendium. And I talked about a lot of issues that we need to speak of when we talk about all that clean transportation technology. But I also want to make sure that I say what a great document that is. It is so loaded with information, a tremendous amount that will be important to all of us as we're taking this back to our communities. And I hope everybody takes the time to really read through that compendium, because you're going to need it so that you can talk in an informed fashion when you are talking to your communities. And I did want to remind everybody that each and every slide deck that we've seen today is available online. It's on the SCAG website, and you can just go on in there and get it. And then you can share those slide decks with your other colleagues, and again, with any community members where you think that's going to be important. But thank you so much for this, because this was an excellent presentation with a lot of really important information that really integrates well with the number 9, which was the Clean Transportation Technology Compendium. Thank you.
Thank you. So today's SCAG SAT word is compendium. That is the word for the day. Very good. All righty. Anyone else in the room? I do see Russell Betts. You're on, Russell.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Will this plan have any increase on the cost of delivering goods to market? Will it have any inflationary impacts? Has that been looked at?
Yeah, I don't believe that was a direct component of the state study, but my opinion would be there are going to be implications for cost, definitely, as far as what we understand with the vehicles and the infrastructure. But if you're looking for a study to assess that, this study did not particularly get into that.
Okay, so they're not looking at if cost of groceries are going to go up as a result of putting this plan in place, correct?
No, I think it was mostly focused more on, well, I guess if you want to draw a connection to that, they recognize the cost as a barrier for fleets or for entities. So they're looking at incentivizing or subsidizing, extending subsidy over a period of time. I would say 2025, they feel like private public funds can potentially achieve, but thereafter further subsidy potentially would be required. But to your point, at some point, yes, all these costs eventually will become absorbed by who can absorb them, and that has a potential implication.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Karen Spiegel.
I was agreeing with Russell. My questions, the first one was, excuse me, the cost of not recognizing beyond just the fleet. I think that's not taking the whole picture into account, and it's kind of a little nervous. But more importantly is, you have now just, this bill restricts all the truck users for the inability of crossing state lines, because they're not going to have the ability, if having long truck rides, to go across the line and have, whether it's electric or battery or hydrogen, because we're here in California supposedly going to make a conscious effort so that along those truck lines that they can have better access, but they're not going to be recognized in that in other states. And so now we're going to restrict our drivers to either have double vehicle. I don't know if they've even taken that into account. I'm not seeing anything in the document, and I didn't hear you say anything about that. And I'm just concerned that what we're going to be doing to our own truck drivers here in our state.
Yeah, that definitely a very valid concern. And there was mentioning in the document, I think at least on the binational side as well, interstate, binational, right? These are all truck interchange or truck flow areas crossing geographic points. So that's not something at the forefront within this. It's something that needs to be considered, though. So they did acknowledge that there needs to be further assessment at the border, but it's directly applicable to what you're saying as well.
Yeah, so they can acknowledge it, but you're now going to, put a huge financial burden that we're going to acknowledge somewhere down the line. That's what we're responsible to our folks here in California, that now have limited their ability to expand their business or continue their business as they've been doing. Sorry, I'm just, those things of not thinking outside the box on the cost that will inflate, because someone's got to pay that, and there's not going to be enough dollars. I mean, when you're talking the billions that it's going to be, and they're not going to have the 10 to 15 billion needed by 2035, and who's going to pay that? That's going to come back on the cost of things that are going to be used in freight. So those are two major components that have very little acknowledgement. So the acknowledgement, that's not going to help us move it forward. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Supervisor Spiegel. Certainly can appreciate your comments. Another way perhaps of looking at it is if we don't act, what are the costs? And I think it's important to look at the consequences when we perhaps don't take those what one might call bold actions. But I certainly can appreciate the concern expressed by Supervisor Spiegel. Okay, I'm not seeing any other speakers at this time. Mr. Strzelecki, thank you so much for your presentation. Certainly stirred up this body at the end of this Transportation Committee meeting. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, let's go ahead and move on to the chair's report. Want to just remind everyone to please mark your calendars for SCAG's 14th Annual Southern California Economic Summit on December 7th at the Sheraton Grand in downtown Los Angeles, right here. The program will explore the major economic factors that inform Connect SoCal 2024, SCAG's draft regional transportation plan, sustainable community strategy, generating new jobs to creating efficiency gains for commuters, shipping, and travel. Elected officials and city managers of SCAG's member jurisdictions may attend for free. So if anybody's charging you, it's not us. Okay. Registration is now open at scag.ca.gov/economic summit. And that concludes my report. I will turn it over to President Art Brown for the MetroLink report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. MetroLink launched a student adventure pass last month. This pilot program allows any student of any age with a valid school ID to obtain a pass at no charge and ride anywhere in the MetroLink system for free. The program is made possible by grant funding for the Low Carbon Transit Operating Program administered by Caltrans. The program extends through March of 2024. I believe Larry said earlier that he took a train in that was full of students that using the program. So it's really going to work out great for the kids and the college students. Durand Street grade separation, the Federal Railroad Administration has awarded $38.3 million grant through its railroad crossing elimination program to the LA Metro for the Durand Street grade separation project at Glendale. This project will build a grade crossing that links Los Angeles and Glendale by connecting West San Fernando Road to Fairmont Avenue Bridge, closing the current at-grade crossing and improving safety along the Los San and MetroLink corridor. Construction will begin in 2025. And last but not least, Santa Barbara service. The Santa Barbara County Association of Governments and the Ventura County Transportation Commission are working together to explore options to bring MetroLink service to Santa Barbara and Goleta by extending the Ventura County line round trip in the AM and PM peak hours. This funding is being provided by the Federal Transit Administration and the Santa Barbara County Measure A funding and could start as early as next year. Currently, I think Amtrak only runs 2 trains a day up to that way, so it'd be in addition to that. And before I stop, I'd like to request that Mr. Chair, I'd like to request that there was a speaker at Future Points earlier this year at their conference representing the trucking industry. I wonder if we could get him in here to do a program for this committee, explaining the actual costs that he sees for the trucking industry, because there seems to be a lot of questions about that for the committee members, and it'd be a very valuable program to present.
Absolutely. And if I recall correctly, we did have a speaker that was talking about the ports and the impact to the truck drivers, but we can certainly include that in a future agenda item. If we can get that information, Mr. Brown, who that speaker is, or presenter, or if you don't have one, I'm sure we have one. Yeah. Thank you.
Future Points will be on the agenda, and we are a member of that board.
Absolutely. Great. All right, I'll go ahead and thank you, President Brown. I'll turn it over to staff.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple items. Just a reminder that the call for applications for the Regional Utility Supporting Housing Pilot Program is still open through November 6th. It's a competitive program with an estimated $35 million available for our member agencies. So please reach out if you have any questions. With the release of the draft Connect SoCal plan, SCAG will be holding elected official workshops throughout the 6-county SCAG region. In addition to the elected official briefings, there will be 3 public hearings held in early December. Please reach out to staff if you'd like any information regarding those Connect SoCal outreach opportunities. And please keep an eye out for the elected official invites, as SCAG is continuously engaging to make sure that all of your counterparts are able to attend and participate in that briefing. And then just a last thing, a reminder, next month, there will be no SCAG policy committees or regional council, as we'll be convening for the economic summit. That concludes my report.
Thank you. Thank you, David. So we now go into announcements. Any announcements at this time? Yes.
Not an announcement. I just have a question. Is that clean technology compendium available separately on the SCAG site? And if it is, could you send us all a link?
We can do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, not seeing any other announcements. Listen, thank you everyone for your participation in this.